Welcome back to For Real, and welcome to a new edition of News Moto, where Jeremy rides and I talk to you about the news. As you'd expect, the news is going to be dominated by stories about COVID, so let's get going. Today's numbers, we had 480 more new cases today, which is a little bit less than we've been having over the past week or so. The numbers have been like in the 500-600s. So 480 is slightly lower. Early days to call it a trend, but of course we're hoping that it is. And the total now has just gone over the 20,000 mark. So it's a fairly significant big round number. For Cambodia to reach, unfortunately. It's actually 20,223 in total, and nearly 12,000 of those are currently active. As you might know, Cambodia's got 25 provinces, and up until now, 24 of those have had cases of COVID discovered, and the last province, which is Ratnakiri, has fallen today. So they've detected 2 cases there. Which is unfortunate because it is one of those very remote outlying provinces near the border with Vietnam and Laos. It's a beautiful and mountainous province, and it has people living in very remote villages, so really hoping that infections don't take off in places like that, because it would be really, really hard to treat those people. The reason that we know about those 2 cases is because it was news that they were the first ones to be detected in that province. But something that has changed recently, so in the past week or so, they've changed the way that the case numbers are reported. So we used to get a breakdown every day of how many cases had been detected in each province, and quite a bit of information. But now they've decided to just give one number for the entire country, and we don't know whereabouts any of those are. It's up to the individual provinces to decide whether they disclose that information and how much of it, what level of detail. So the Ministry of Health has decided not to continue doing that. I think it's going to be a permanent thing, and we can only hope that the provinces decide that it's within the interest of the population to know where the cases are being discovered. Because at the moment, there could be 1,000 cases and you wouldn't know if any of them were in the same province where you were living. And you just have to assume that everybody has potential to carry COVID, but it does help to know where the clusters are. In April, there was a ban that said you could not travel between provinces. That lasted for about 2 weeks and ended on the 25th of April. So since the 25th of April, travel between provinces has been okay, with the exception of Phnom Penh and Tak Mau. And the travel ban that existed with those was lifted just last week on the 6th of May. So the 6th of May was a Thursday, and we certainly did see large numbers of people coming down to Kampot from Phnom Penh on that weekend. So the Friday, Saturday and Sunday that followed, there was definitely a swelling of the population here as people left Phnom Penh for the first time in a couple of weeks. This has been pretty concerning for us because alongside these reports of the provincial travel bans being lifted, there's also reports of people violating, people going where they shouldn't, people from red zones kind of trying to sneak their way out and go to places, people being discovered in provinces where they shouldn't be, things like that. So I think we're going to try and stay inside over the weekends. We've got a long weekend coming up this weekend, so we're expecting again to see large numbers of people coming down from Phnom Penh, and we will do our best to stay away from crowds. So the other side of the COVID coin is the vaccination situation. We've just received another 500,000 doses of Sinovac in Cambodia today. This is the 3rd big delivery that we've received of the Sinovac. The first one was 1.5 million and the second was about the same, I think. Some AstraZeneca is still coming in, I think, through the COVAX initiative, but the numbers of that vaccine are much smaller. Since the Sinopharm, I think it is, has been recognised by the WHO just recently, I think it will become part of the COVAX initiative as well, and will be one of the ones that's distributed under that initiative. And I think that will mean that if you are not over the age of 60, your chances of getting AstraZeneca here in Cambodia will be much lower. I would quite happily have the Chinese vaccination, and Jeremy would as well. even if its efficacy is slightly less than some of the other vaccines available, anything is better than nothing, and if it's 50% effective, that's better than 0% in our minds. So Cambodia's got a population of around 16 million, and they're aiming to vaccinate around 13 million. I guess there are some people that just can't tolerate the vaccination, or they're too young, or I don't know, various other health reasons. So 13 million out of the 16 is the goal. As you know, in Phnom Penh, they divided the worst hit areas into different zones. So they had a red zone, a dark yellow zone, and a yellow zone, with the red zone obviously being the worst affected, with the most people being infected with COVID. They've just discovered that 84 police officers who've been working in that area to contain COVID and to contain the boundaries of the area have been tested positive for COVID. So I guess that's pretty concerning for the people there. We're aware of a case where a minivan from Phnom Penh travelling to Siem Reap was carrying a person who had COVID, and now all of the occupants of that van are in a 14-day quarantine, and they're in one of the local high schools that's been converted to a quarantine area. So actually somebody that we know is in quarantine there right now. I think he's been there for 2 days, so looking at least another 12 more. We're going to try and get an update from him about what the circumstances there are like, what the environment's like, what restrictions they have on their movement and that kind of thing, because we've never actually known anybody before who's been in one of those government kind of run quarantine centres, as opposed to a hotel when you first come into the country. Another concerning development is that 30 inmates in the Sihanoukville prison have been tested positive. Actually, I think it was 34, more than 30 inmates. Yeah. So, of course, with the overcrowding that we have in prisons here, it's going to be very, very difficult to contain an outbreak once it's loose inside a prison. Really feel for those people, especially because so many people here are held in pre-trial detention and may not even be found to be guilty, or may have served out their terms before they're even sentenced. And not to forget that, as we know, children as young as 14 are sent to prisons in Cambodia, so there are children that can be affected by this as well. It's really, really concerning, and if it's happened in Sihanoukville, it shows that it's possible in other prisons as well. It will be really good to see how seriously they take this, because there are other prisons around the country that have much higher numbers of children residing in them, and there's also prisons with women, and also prisons with women and their children accompanying them in prison. So lots of innocent people that could be affected by that. I'm sorry that it is all doom and gloom with this news. It's unfortunate, but that's the way the situation is in Cambodia at the moment. But we do have 2 more lighthearted stories to end our news run today with. And the first one is a bit of a tale of entrepreneurial success, or maybe entrepreneurial failure, considering that these women were arrested, and they were arrested for selling fake vaccination cards to factory workers. So, as you know, factories are big business here, garment factory workers, there are thousands and thousands of them, and I think preference is given to people that can prove that they have had a vaccination, because there have been outbreaks in some of the factories. So these enterprising women have started creating fake vaccination cards that they were then selling to women so that they could go to work in the factories. When you see an opportunity, sometimes you have to go for it. I know it's serious and I know they shouldn't be doing it, but you've got to take your laughs when you can get them in this environment, I think. And that leads me to my favourite story of the last few days. And this is about some people that were caught violating curfew, and as punishment they were made to run laps. So it was in Phnom Penh, and it was close to one of the really big traffic roundabouts they had there, and the police that found these violators made them run laps around the big roundabout as punishment, and then they were given a verbal dressing down once they reached the end of their 10 laps. You've got to love the initiative, and you have to wonder, you know, if these are really poor people, what's the point in giving them a fine? It just makes the situation even worse. So a creative way to deal with the problem, and I'm sure they're not going to forget that very hot run around the roundabout anytime soon. I hope you've enjoyed today's news ride, And don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got a lot of links in our description to people that we follow and other people that make content about Cambodia. We do like to support each other, the three of us. Special shout out today to Mark's Mildly Interesting and to Dave Does Cambodia. You're probably aware of those guys, and I know most of you watch all three channels, and that's wonderful. We have a really nice little community going on, so keep supporting them. If you're new here and you haven't seen those guys, go check them out and you'll get more information about Cambodia. If you haven't followed my Instagram, you might want to go and check that out. Still photography is probably more of a passion of mine than video ever was. Making YouTube was just something that I fell into that was more of Jeremy's interest. So if you're interested in seeing some of that stuff, I'll put a link below, and you are more than welcome to catch up with me over there and have a look at some photos of places that we visit around Kampot. I love that some of you missed the kitty at the end of our videos, so we have decided to put him back as a permanent feature so he won't be missing again. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.